So, hi everyone, welcome to another live stream. Today, my guest is the amazing Justin Coro Kaufman. I have heard of him for the first time when I saw an amazing painting. I think it was a painting of your family. With
Yeah,
At the
yeah, yeah.
bottom, there was just brush strokes in all kinds of colors, and I think it probably your wife and such an amazing painting, and that's the first painting I saw, and I started to look who you were, and you're not just a painter, you're also an illustrator, concept artist. If I'm correct, you're also the president of Massive Black,
I'm
um,
the creative director,
creative
so
director.
close
Okay.
enough. My wife is the president. I make her do the.
Okay, cool.
I convinced her to do the tough stuff. I
Okay.
just get to come in and
Did you found that?
I did. Yeah,
Okay.
me and seven other people founded that company.
Okay.
God, back in 2004, I think. I
Okay.
think.
Could
So
you
yeah,
could
and
you
then
talk a little bit about that? What you do?
Sure, yeah. So Massive Black was kind of the brainchild of conceptart.org, which was a website that me and some other artists were a part of, many, many years ago. Probably we started that back in like 2002, I guess. And conceptart.org was like an online, art forum that was kind of centered mainly around entertainment art, that type of thing. What had happened is, we'd been running it for a few years, and it started to gain some popularity. There's a decent amount of traffic on the site, and we started getting hit up for freelance jobs. The various members of the main group there, and we'd all kind of start talking about it, and we're like, hey, maybe we should start swapping work or pooling stuff together, because we were all working full-time jobs at the time. So it was
Okay.
kind of an easy way for us to kind of double up and start a second thing. And so yeah, we started doing that. It was myself and Jason Manley and Andrew Jones originally. Like us three were like the three main guys, and yeah, so we started just kind of tossing work between each other and doing that. And before we knew it, larger contracts started coming in, and we were having to quit our jobs and go work
Wow.
full time on it. And it was a pretty wild time. I mean, it was scary. I did not want to do it. I was firmly in the camp of I have a good paying corporate
Okay.
job and I don't want to go do this. But we got these we got a really big contract in, and it was one of those like we either jump now or this probably isn't going to
Okay.
happen.
Okay.
And so we all jumped, and everybody moved to San Francisco. The whole group kind of migrated up that way, and I mean, I'd been there already, so I got the easy part.
Okay.
But yeah, we moved up there, started a company, everyone moved there. We got a studio together. It was very, fly by the seat of our pants, fake it till you make it, for the first few years there, definitely. But we found our groove. I was fortunate enough to uh, have been able to hire on like a really strong group of artists that I worked with for a number of years, still work with. And Yeah, I mean, it's been one big, long, weird, strange ride. Honestly, I mean,
Mm.
I feel I feel very lucky, very fortunate that I've had the same job for 15 years now, which is wild. I mean,
Wow.
it's a rare thing in this industry to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
work at the same place for that long. I mean, it hasn't always been easy. There's been a lot of crazy shit that's happened. I mean, we could spend a whole session going on about that stuff. I mean,
Bring it
that's
on, bring it on.
yeah, I mean, just shareholder problems,
Mm.
infighting. I mean, we started a company with seven founders. You know,
Okay.
that's a very difficult
Mm.
line to walk. And after a few years, people drop off, people find other interests, and
Okay, yeah.
go off on their own. And so I mean, there's a lot of that. You just kind of missteps. I mean, none of us were business people. Starting
Hmm.
out, we were all artists. So that, none of us
Okay, yeah.
came from a business background. I managed to rope my wonderful wife into this thing pretty early on because she paid our bills, at the house. And I was like, hey, nobody's doing any of the
Okay.
administrative stuff. You think you could help out? And so I looped her in pretty early on that. But I
Okay.
mean, she too didn't have a whole lot of background in that stuff. So we all just kind of learned at the same time and
Oh, wow.
figured it out as we went along. And yeah, I mean, it's been a long, strange ride for sure,
Yeah, yeah. And
for sure.
did you work together on the same project, or were you just a separate artist working under the same roof?
So you know what would happen is a lot of times we became kind of this like clients would come to us and be like, all right, so here's our project, here's what we want. And we found that it was advantageous I found that it was a really good method to throw the whole team onto a project, you know what I mean, and
Hmm.
kind of have people work on something simultaneously. I feel like you get better results that way. There would be conversation happening within the team, within the bullpen. We would discuss and talk and share ideas, and everyone would kind of come up with their own take on whatever the client brief would be, and then we would present and go from there. Typically the
Yeah.
client would choose something, and we would whittle down. And in a best case scenario, on a large enough job, everyone would get something picked, and we would be able to kind of roll forward that way.
Okay.
My job for a good amount of years was just kind of the spackler. I
Hmm.
came in and like fixed things that people didn't want to do, or
Okay.
weren't getting approved, stuff like that. So I mean, just as manager, or as a manager, that was kind of my function. And yeah, kind of an interesting skill to acquire. I feel like I feel
Hmm.
lucky having done it. I think it gives you a pretty unique view in kind of under the hood of
Yeah.
what makes a concept work. So
Yeah, both
yeah.
for the technically for the work, but also the how different minds of people working on it work.
Oh,
People
100%.
think in different ways, or they you know how you motivate them.
Well, and then wrangling a bullpen of artists, is like herding cats, right? I mean,
Mm.
everyone's got their own.
Yeah.
Artists are just quirky. We're all quirky people, So
Mm.
it was an interesting line to walk for sure,
Yeah.
but fun. And to touch on what you said, the psychology of it, right? I mean, I think having worked with a team together like that, and kind of group solving a lot of these problems together, it allowed me to cue into that pretty well.
Yeah.
The psychology behind what makes a concept work
Yeah.
is very little about the lines and the shapes, and
Mm.
so much of it is about what it's communicating, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a skill that I probably picked up doing what I had to do for the past whatever years,
Mm. Did
decade and a
you
half.
did you target a specific type of jobs? Because I can imagine, some people they have different interests than others. Did you
Mhm.
know exactly altogether where you wanted to go, or was it just, whatever comes our way, we will deal with?
It was very much whatever comes our way we'll deal with. Yeah, I mean, I think our portfolios and tastes, at the time, probably dictated a lot of the work that we were
Mm.
getting. I mean, it's like the old thing. If you want to paint spaghetti, you put a portfolio of paintings of spaghetti
Yeah.
together, and people will hire you for that, right?
Yeah.
So I think I mean, we were all fucking rock and roll concept guys in our early mid 20s, drawing skulls and fire and demons and shit like that. So I feel like that probably dictated a lot of the clients we got. But we got all kinds of jobs over the years. I mean, it was always kind of a random grab bag of stuff, and I didn't like turning things down for a number of reasons. I mean, obviously because I had a crew to feed, and
Mhm.
you're trying to keep money going through, and as a small business, you often don't have the luxury of turning things down. But
Mhm.
also, like, I enjoy working on a broad range of things. I have never been one that was like, I just want to work on Space Marine game for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
cool, and I respect the shit out of people that are able to take a genre and drill down on it, and create something that's like really uniquely theirs, and push that ball forward. I'm not that guy. I've always been kind of one of those people. I like drawing all kinds of different stuff. I get bored easy.
Mhm.
So it's I found that this job was fairly well suited for that, for
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
because I was able to touch on something, work on something else, work on something else. There would be days, where you work on 4 or 5 different projects throughout the course of a day, and by the end of the day, your head is just kind of spaghetti. But it's a really great learning
Oh,
process. You know what I mean?
absolutely.
And you're
Yeah.
putting yourself in very uncomfortable situations where you will take something away from that.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah, I
very cool
personally love
experience.
that too. As a freelancer, I did all kinds of things, and what I always loved was that, the client asks of you to draw something that you would not naturally, draw to. I'm not someone who loves to draw cars, for example, but then,
Right.
for a certain job, you have to draw cars, and because you're forced to do that, you find a way to make it fun, and you learn so much because of it.
Oh, totally, totally. And you'll like, it's like every once in a while you'll find one of those things and it'll unlock this thing where you're like, oh my God, why was I not doing this the whole time? Why was I not
Yeah,
drawing
yeah,
cars? I
exactly.
found,
Yeah,
I hated drawing cars. I thought I hated drawing cars, but now I like doing it,
yeah,
and
exactly.
that happened to me time and time again over the years,
Yeah,
doing this type of stuff because of what you said. I mean, a client's going to ask you to do something that you would never do when left to your own devices, and that's a good thing. I think
yeah,
it allows you to
absolutely.
learn.
Yeah, well, and speaking of being left to your own devices, you also do a lot of personal work, and
I
paintings
tried to.
that are insane when
Thank you, man.
when you look at them, and what I really find interesting is that some of your paintings, well, there's a lot of things I think of your paintings, but one of the things is that sometimes you take a subject that everyone would just ignore. It's just a little bit of grass and a yellow flower in it,
Right.
but it's not even a special flower, and it's just a little bit of grass, that you can see next to the sidewalk, and it's nothing special in itself, and then you paint it, and then it becomes something where you say, wow, this is so beautiful, and then also
Thank
the
you,
the
man.
way you paint it is like, at first glance it's like, wow, this is almost uh, pure realism, but then when you step closer, it's so rough brushstrokes and all kinds of colors, and you're really experimenting, and you find such a beautiful balance between those extremes.
Thank you, man.
It's
I
really
really
amazing.
appreciate that. I mean, I feel like the fine art stuff has certainly evolved over the years. I went to school for painting originally, and I fell in love with oil paint, back in school, and it's always been something that I always wanted to keep going. When I stumbled into doing concept art, and it was like, oh, you do this on a computer, I was kind of like, okay, well, that's cool. I know computers are the future, and we should all learn them, But I always kept one foot, in the oil paint stuff because it was just something that always, I don't know, it sounds weird, but it just always came kind of natural to me. It was something that like the materials made sense in my brain,
Hmm.
and it's something that like I just felt like the same way, you see someone can jam on a guitar. Like that's how I feel like when I'm pushing oil around. It's
Hmm.
that organic. You can just make it
Yes.
do what you want, and you can take risks and just live within these boundaries that that exist. And yeah, I mean, so I've always tried to do it. Subject matter wise, I jumped around quite a bit over the years. I really liked painting people. Back in the day, I was really into painting cityscapes. I think you paint what's around you. Honestly, I
Hmm.
mean, I've found for myself anyway, it's definitely. I feel like I do my best work when I'm interested in what I'm painting.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's hard to explain, but there's just those things. Like sometimes you'll just get that lightning strike where you're like, I have to paint that.
Yes.
Ah, that would be. I have to paint that. And it's since I moved. We moved up to Washington State about 5 years ago, and moved out in the middle of the forest out here. And yeah, I never painted nature stuff
Hmm.
before, but being around this just such lush green foliage everywhere,
Hmm.
I found it super fascinating. I grew up in the desert,
Okay.
so I was never around any of that
That's a
stuff.
big contrast.
Yeah, my whole childhood was like wandering around in the desert, poking dead things with sticks and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I was, that's what you do out in the desert. Find like old boxes of porno mags. I don't know why. Why is it there's always like old boxes of pornography out in the desert? Who puts them there? I don't know. But that was like my childhood, was digging around in the desert. And so moving up here, I mean, it's just such a different scene, and like biome, the light, the colors, everything. And I just kind of it starts with that like kind of thing where like, man, I wonder if I could paint that. I wonder how hard that would be to paint.
Mm.
You're looking at the tree or whatever, and you're like, I mean, it's a technical problem, and so I started kind of experimenting with that stuff up here and just fell in love with it. I fell in love with it. It kind of unlocked something that I feel like I hadn't been doing. Also in my work for a long time, I began underpainting again, like doing
Okay.
monochromatic underpaintings and just working in a way, whereas up until then I had been a direct painter where I painted just, I usually didn't do an underpainting.
Mm.
So it's just kind of a different layered approach to working that, allowed me to better kind of capture or fake the complexity of,
Yes.
nature stuff. And I mean, it's totally turned into this thing. I love doing it now. I mean, it's
Wow.
my kind of, if I'm not working on client stuff, I'm typically out here trying to paint something out of my backyard. It's always my backyard too. Like
Okay.
I've
Okay.
been adamant about this, where because
Just
I
like
feel like
Monet.
yeah, that's right. It's well, you want to paint what's close to you, and I'm a huge believer in that. That like if I'm going to paint something, I want to have some sort of personal connection to it.
Yeah.
Uh, it's also why I typically don't take a lot of commissions. I don't do a lot of stuff that's like tropey stuff that that would sell in a gallery. I'll be
Mhm.
honest. I feel like typically my paintings tend to be a little more like, I mean, they're almost like personal diary entries or something like
Yeah.
that. They're meant to serve almost more of that, where, oh, that flower, I love these weeds that grow out behind my shop,
Yeah.
this time
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
year, that bright ass color. And, it doesn't mean anything but to me probably, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's those
Absolutely.
little personal things that, I mean, there's definitely a story behind all of them, but it's a boring story because it's my backyard.
No, but I think that's for me, that's what artists do. They take something that nobody notices, but you see it in a certain way, and through paint, you show it to me where I can see it in a similar way. Suddenly it becomes special to me too, even though it's just a flower, or and as a painter, I think what you do is you observe. You spend so many hours looking at your subject matter that you start seeing things, and you select things that you want to take out,
Totally,
or things that you
absolutely,
don't want to put in there, and so you really express something that stands out to you, and you do it in a personal way, and you I think because the subject matter is also personal, it becomes such a strong message, because no one in the world would be able to tell that message, because it's yours. It's so
totally,
close
totally.
to who you are.
Well, I mean, like I feel like our superpower as artists is being able to like take the mundane, kind of like take something that people would take for granted and pull them closer and show them that there's something beautiful about it,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, this stuff is, I feel like, been kind of my swan song for that. Like doing this nature stuff, which I would have never called, man. I would have never thought that in a million
Mm.
years that I enjoy doing this stuff.
Yeah.
I was always so into painting people and scenes and narrative stuff and action and shit like that. And it's been strange even just looking inside and finding the joy that I find doing this stuff. And I'm
Mm.
like, wow, I would have just never guessed it. Would have never guessed it.
Wow. Yeah, for me, I feel like I'm still looking for that, because I know I know the area where it is, but I don't
Right.
feel I have found. I'm still just looking around, trying to figure out what really is me, and I'm getting closer. I feel, because it has to do with my personal way of translating my
Yes.
experiences, and I feel uh, how I want to do that, but I don't feel yet that maybe it's subject matter is something that I'm jumping around trying all things, and I haven't
Right.
found that there's some kind of peace in what you do. It feels like you're completely comfortable with, I'm painting a tree, and
Yeah.
it may take months. I don't know, but it looks like it takes
Yeah.
months.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
totally. Totally. It
and
does.
yeah, and it shows. There's no rush or stress in it, and uh, Yeah, that's really inspiring.
Well, dude, your translation is amazing, man. Like the way you're able to like take like an image or your whatever you're seeing and turn it into translate it into the brushstrokes that you're able to do and still have things read and convey exactly what you're trying to say.
Oh,
It's
thanks.
very very unique and very distinct. And I
Oh,
mean, I just
thank
got to
you.
say, yeah, I love your stuff, man. I love what you're doing. Everything you're painting, man, right now has
Oh,
just been
thanks. I appreciate
on
it.
fire. Yeah, it's
Thanks.
really cool. Very very cool.
Yeah, I think when it comes to that subject matter and the combination of doing client work, brings us to the subject really, about working from imagination and working from observation. Um,
Right.
because, I can imagine if you're doing storyboards, a lot of it is just from imagination, and then
Hmm.
your skills based on, all the time you did live drawings and all, come together, but you can from your mind come up with scenes and lighting and color. But when you're painting a tree, I imagine you're much more focused on responding to, and I was wondering how much of uh, uh, well, how do you call that? Planning and pushing shapes or changing shapes or coming up with your own ideas in there. Uh, First, because for me, there's really a difference between when I, put a still life in place and I start painting. It's really
Oh, totally.
literally responding to what I see, and that it doesn't dictate what I paint, but uh, it triggers a different kind of imagination than when I paint a still life from imagination, because then everything is constructed. So
Totally.
how is that balance for you? And do
That's a really good question. Yeah, like, and it's something that I feel like I have kind of like pondered and thought a lot about over the years. And it's I the best way I can describe it is I feel like it's like two different roadmaps, kind of. If you're painting something that's in front of you, you have a guide, you have a map that's sitting out in front of you, and it's there and you can interpret it. I mean, definitely, I try not to, like we all do, we try not to replicate exactly, but you want to interpret what you see.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're making it up, I almost feel like it's less of a map and it's almost more like directions. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Where you're kind of like, all right, well, I know where I want to go, but I'm not, it's not dialed out exactly for me visually, but I know where I need to go
Mm.
next, right?
Yeah.
And so I almost feel like the drawing without reference is I relate it almost more to sculpting in a way, because you're kind of like carving things out and pushing and pulling in a way that's very different. When I start something from life or from observation, a lot of times I will start uh, with like a fairly accurate drawing. You know what I mean? We draw. You could sit down and you could figure out and measure. Yes, Bob. Sorry, someone's groaning over. You could figure that out. Whereas with when you're creating something from your mind, none of that's there. Sorry, we have a what? Bob, come here. Come here. Come here. Well, don't just stand there and bark. Anyway, but I feel like when you're working from your mind, it's definitely less of a like I don't do a line drawing that same way. I work oftentimes with larger shapes, rougher shapes, and just kind of it's definitely a less precise art.
Mm.
But in the same vein, you know, you do this for long enough. I feel like I don't revise or underdraw or I don't change things very much. Even with if I'm not referencing,
Yeah.
just because you do something for enough years. I feel like I typically will have like a pretty clear idea of what I'm aiming for in my head. And I remember talking to illustrators about this like years ago. Like, yeah, how close can you get to the image in your head, right?
Mm.
At any point, you'll have kind of a general idea of what you want to do,
Hmm.
and you sit down and you do it. And when you first start, it's like, ugh, I knew what I wanted, and I have this pile of shit sitting, and just over the years that those things start kind of coming together, and you get better at that, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like I've certainly gained a decent handle on that, to where I'm pretty confident drawing and painting without, looking at anything. And I'm pretty confident that I can usually come up with something that at least looks like something.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
It's
yeah,
that.
you're definitely using a different part of your brain.
Mm.
I mean, I think all of the life drawing and drawing from observation is enormously helpful.
Yeah.
The practical stuff. I mean, even the like mixing color, mixing colors and figuring out palettes and things like that. Those things you remember, and when you're working without anything in front of you, you go, well, what was that sunset?
Yeah.
For me, mixing paint is actually really instructive. It totally dials those palettes into my brain in a way that I don't feel like I get working digitally the same way.
No.
It's really, really helpful. So I mean, I feel like that's been kind of a. What are you doing? Sorry, I got a dog here. Right?
We were going to talk about dogs. I
But yeah,
read.
I mean, I think it's interesting, like the drawing from life versus drawing from your head thing, because like I'm seeing. I think back, maybe 20 or so years ago, there were different camps. It seemed like there were people that seemed to working exclusively from their heads, and there seemed to be people who liked working exclusively from life. And I feel like maybe it's the internet and it's this just kind of massive sharing of ideas, and people can see so many different kinds of art now, and it's available, and things are less genrefied. You go on Instagram and you look at like who's following who, and it's really interesting because it's not fine artists only following fine
That's
artists
true,
or illustrators only it's all mixed together now in a way that I don't think was as messy or organic as it was
That's
pre-internet.
true. Yeah.
And so, I mean, from my just looking at things, I feel like fine artists seem more willing or receptive to working out of their heads. Concept artists, like people who traditionally, didn't like working from reference. I feel like there's more of an acceptance of that now, and working realistically and adopting academic ideas, academic drawing ideas and approaches. So, I mean, it's which I think has been great. I mean, I think in the 20 years, I've been working as a professional, I've seen the work just like.
Yeah, maybe it also has to do with the fact that both of them are sharing a way to make money off their art on the internet. They're competing with each other also.
Yep.
But
That's a good point.
or working together, depending on how you want to see this. But it's the same. Instagram feed. Someone's looking at it and thinks, hey, I want to buy something from this artist, and the client may not care if it's fine art or illustration or comics or. So that probably brings them closer together also.
It's been great to see, man, honestly, because I feel like there used to be such a divide with that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, even within our little field, it was like, oh, concept artist and comic book artist, basically the same skill set.
Yes.
Traditionally, there wasn't a whole lot of overlap,
Yeah.
And I feel like that has, like, a lot of those barriers are broken down, and I mean, to see.
Has it ever been a problem for you yourself? Have you been thinking inside those boxes ever, or have you all? Because I have.
That's a good question.
Because people tell you long enough that you can't do caricatures because there will never be a serious art form. At a certain point, I just stopped doing caricatures because I felt, well, and now I feel like it's not about caricature, it's about how you do them.
Absolutely.
If you do great art, it can be anything. And
it can be anything.
It's about what you believe in, what you want to express, and if you love doing comics, you can do comics, and it's not less of an art form than any art form.
No, but like to echo what you said there, I completely agree with you. I mean, there have been these institutions where you understand. Well, I could never do that. Well, that's not what I'm trying to do. And certainly with comic books, people like, for years, it was kind of just like looked down on kind of medium for, largely. I mean, not. I always loved the stuff, but
Hmm.
like just culturally, it was like nerds,
Yeah.
it's not real art, and it's been so fucking cool to see how that has been turned on its head,
Mm.
and the fact that it's like, oh no, no, it is real art, and those guys doing it are actually incredibly talented people.
Yes.
So it's a skill just like anything else. Hold on, I just got a text. I just got a text from Marco Djurdjevic. He just texted me and said I'm an ass. I tell him you're an ass. There we go. Get him. Take that. Anyway, sorry.
You felt like
I
he
saw the
needed to
text like
remind
pop
you,
up.
I think.
I know. I was like, oh, I'm an ass. What? I guess he's watching me be an ass. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe.
Um, so someone asked, Scott Ferguson asked, can you speak at all about your comic, the
Oh, the
comic?
comic. Oh, the comic. Yeah. So the comic. Uh, I wrote a comic book about 10 years ago now. It was called Transient. And it all started because many, many years ago, living in San Francisco, walking around with my friends at lunch. We see. I remember it was some naked guy pushing a shopping cart, and he's talking to himself. And I was like, man, wouldn't it be funny to like film that and comp in like what he's talking to? I wonder what he's talking to because it could be fucking anything, right?
Mm.
Because I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it could be a giant dick monster with whatever. So yeah, I mean, it all kind of started from that idea, that original idea. I did 10 pages. I'd never done comics before. I'd never even kind of approached it, but like we were talking about it at work, and it was kind of an idea that I was like, man, I'll bet I could do like a 10-page intro just to like kind of wrap my head around what it's like doing something
Yeah.
like this. So I did a 10-page intro, and then it sucked and it was terrible, and I put it down and I didn't touch it for a long time. And then a few years later, I showed it to another friend of mine who was a comic book artist, and he tore me a new one. We kind of went through frame, panel for panel, and he was like, "Here's what you want to do. Don't do this, do's and don'ts." And I wrote it down, took it to heart, and kind of like started. I was like, "All right, well, now I'm gonna really try to do this thing." And so it started as kind of a casual, oh well, we'll see how far this gets. I'll see if I can do 20 pages. And so I got to 20 pages, and then I was like, shit, I'm nowhere near where, like it was like, like I did the classic mistake too, where I didn't write it first. I just
Okay.
kind of started doing it. And so I was kind of borrowing my pacing from films, and kind of like, okay, here's what would happen next. Oh, something like this would probably happen. So it was a very organic process.
Okay.
Uh, as I hit 20 pages and I'm like, fuck, there's no way. Maybe we'll see if I could get it done in 50. And then as I was coming up on 50, I was like barely coming up on the first arc of Act One, and I was like, oh man, this is the whole thing I wasn't planning on. But in the end, I mean, it took me 4 years. I think it took
Wow.
4 years of just nights and weekends. I stopped painting. I stopped oil painting during that time, and I was
Wow.
just strictly working on the comic book. And I found I could do a full painted page in about a day and a half to 3 days, depending on how many people were in the panels.
Hmm.
And so I just kind of went for it, and it turned into this weird creative odyssey that I learned more doing that stupid comic book than I probably learned in art school and the 5 years working professionally leading up to that. I mean, just in terms of, and not just about the technicals, right? I mean, because there's so much of that, the pacing and storytelling and camera angle and dialogue and lighting, all that stuff. But also just you learn about yourself. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
You learn about like how you can tackle a project like that, and how compartmentalize and rationalize this
Yeah,
insane
what I find
thing.
interesting is that you mentioned that you started with 10 pages first, 20 pages, then 50 pages, and it I think it's a classic way of setting achievable goals to get to a much bigger goal. But at the same
Right.
time, you mentioned you didn't write it at first, so you had no idea how long it was
Nope.
going to take. So
No idea. Yeah.
how did you manage that? Because I can imagine that that would become
So you know what I
overwhelming.
started doing? At a certain point, I would start doing thumbnails. I'd start thumbnailing pages out, right? And so I would have like every couple months I would sit down and spend a few days on these little tiny thumbnails. And I mean they would be, I would take like a letter sized piece of paper and divide it up into like eight pages, and then draw these things and get pretty in depth with them. I feel like the thumbnailing was actually the most important part.
Mm.
Surprise, but it was where I would do all the erasing and the moving and the editing and all that stuff. But I would get these pages of thumbnails done, then I would scan them, blow them up, and it just turned into kind of a process thing where it was like, all right, this is just how it's going to go. The writing was a whole other weird thing where, with the thumbnailing, I feel like I could kind of put my pins in, and figure out where this, plot the story with the
Yeah.
thumbnails. But even still, I wasn't writing dialogue. I was kind of just making it up and just, okay, here's what's going to happen. It was just kind of story beats. And yeah, I mean, I think the thumbnailing helped me kind of write, keep the story straight, and kept me from getting overwhelmed too with just,
Yes.
it ended up being like 230 pages or something like that.
Wow.
And yeah, and I mean, it's just you at this point where you're like, God, I'm at 150, and what the fuck am I doing? Where are we now? And it was
Wow.
just, but it was such a great experience, and it sucked. It was, in the end, it was a pretty bitter pill because what happened is I finished it, we got it printed, turned into this big effort. I had all the big dreams, and I was gonna try to fucking turn this thing into something, and then we had my first son. He was born almost like immediately after we got the books, like a month later. And I just got caught up with that and work and everything else. And it just kind of lost steam and just ended up not doing anything with it really. And now I have a storage unit full of books that are gathering dust
Wow.
now. But I mean, in the end, yes, I ended up with, 2 tons of trash basically. But it was a great experience, and I feel like I learned more off of that book than
Yeah.
anything else I've done. I mean, even to date, I still feel like so much of my process, I kind of honed and figured out and refined doing that comic book. That
Wow. That's so
yeah. So
cool.
it was a good experience. It was a bitter pill at the end, kind of maybe, but.
Mhm.
It was also a very good experience and a wonderful experience that, if I had the choice to do it again, I would do it again no matter what,
Oh wow, that's cool. And it's really a big commitment, and also it's no one told you to do this. It was
Well, and it felt like the stupidest thing in the world to do too, because, I had this company, and I was still doing, that stuff. We were still doing the Massive Black thing, and, I was still art directing full time and doing concept work. And, I wanted to be a painter. I always wanted to be a painter. So it didn't make any sense why I was doing this comic, because that was just never anything that, I liked comics as a kid. I wasn't like a huge comic reader or anything like that, but, I always liked the art. But the whole time I was doing it, I always kind of felt like I was really unqualified to be doing it. You know what I mean? Because I didn't spend that time as a kid reading comic books and learning that genre and, like falling in love with it in a way that a lot of people did. Yeah. So I felt like in a lot of ways I approached it kind of as an outsider, and, maybe that affected it negatively. I don't know.
Okay.
I worked in movie rental for many years as a young man, right? I worked at a Blockbuster. I worked at a Hollywood Video. I rented movie rental. And so I watched tons of movies. I mean, one of the perks with a job like that is every night you get to bring a couple movies home.
Yeah.
So I worked graveyard shift. Every night I would come home with, 3 or 4 movies and lay there until 5 a.m. watching movies. And I think that's where I got, that's where I learned storytelling from. It wasn't. So doing a comic, I feel like I was doing a comic through the lens of film
Yes.
mainly because that was the medium that I learned storytelling from.
Yes.
Not doing it, but just watching it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think
Those
that's a great. I think many people actually learn storytelling through that because we see so many movies. Well, back in the day, I think working at a movie rental was like people watching Netflix nowadays.
yeah, no, totally, totally. It was
Yeah,
because you're just always feeding it. It's just
yeah,
this constant diet of stuff, and you watch all the good stuff, and then you're like, well, what do we have now? Next thing you know, you're just renting, crap. But
yeah.
sometimes it's good, and sometimes you learn stuff off of it. So it's yeah, I actually cite the movie rental experience as being like
Mm.
kind of pivotal to what I ended up doing.
Yeah.
Strangely enough,
Well, I think it's really interesting. I spent a lot of years, I mentioned this in one of the earlier interviews also. I spent a lot of years being really afraid, and because of that, I took on all the work that I could because I didn't want to lose, being able
Right.
to freelance. And so uh, I didn't spend as much time painting as I would love to. It was always on the bottom of my list because there
Right.
were always things I had to do first. And when I hear you talk about doing the comic or your painting, I'm really interested in how you manage that because you also have a family and you have this full-time job. So how do you manage and how do you plan your hours where you can paint just for you?
That's a good question, and it's something that I kind of wonder myself, honestly. Because I'll be honest, I feel like I don't put out enough. I constantly feel like my output is stifled or stunted because of life, responsibilities, things like
Hmm.
that. Uh, it's hard, man. I mean, I don't sleep a lot. I sleep probably 5 hours a night, 5 6 hours a night. I work late. I work doubles. I'm out here all day during the day, and then I come out here after I put the kids down at night, and I'm out here all night. Until I'm passed out in my chair. And I'm not saying that like, oh, I'm working so hard and it's so hard. I love what I do. I mean, we love what we do, and it's not work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is, but it's enjoyable, and I feel a connection to it, or else I wouldn't do it. But it's hard. It's definitely hard
Mm.
budgeting, and I gotta tell you, this coronavirus thing with the kids being home has been
Yeah, I know.
woo, woo, boy, it has been interesting, man. Because I mean, yeah, I have not been getting a whole lot done lately. I'll
Mm.
be honest with you. It's funny because when this thing struck, I'd actually kind of hit like I hit a break with work where I got a couple weeks of downtime. Normally when that happens, I'm like focused, I'm laser
Yeah.
focused, I'm ready. I got a big canvas planned or something, and I'll usually try to tackle something ambitious. But since this happened, with the kids home, and I don't know, man, it's I feel like my vibe has been off too. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
don't know what it's doing, but I just haven't been feeling particularly inspired to work.
Yeah.
So yeah, past 2 weeks now, I've been just basically chasing the kids around the house, and I mean it's been great. I'm not gonna lie, it's been kind of wonderful. But I do kind of have that little nagging voice in the back of my head that's like, you should be painting, fucker. What are you doing? You're wasting your time.
Yes.
I'm fixing to start on something tomorrow. Like we're starting up on a job tomorrow, and I'm actually kind of excited about doing some client work because I'm not responsible for what it is. They'll just tell me what to do, and I
Mm.
can I can
Yeah.
do it and interpret it. I think my brain right now, I don't know what's going on. I'm just not feeling super like a self starter right now. I don't know.
Mm.
Past few weeks has been weird. My game's off. My
Yeah,
game's off.
I know. Yeah. Well, for many people, I think it's just a
I've been
crazy
hearing that a
situation.
lot. Yeah, I've been
Yeah.
hearing that a lot, and I've been hearing a lot of like I've been seeing a lot of artists going, God, I would have thought this staying at home would have, I would have gotten so much done, but I haven't gotten shit done, and I
Mm.
totally fall into that camp. I mean, I've just been kind of
Yeah.
like trying, I've been trying, but just nothing's coming. The well's dry.
Yeah. So how does it work when you do a painting? Um, I assume you work from photo reference.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Typically, I do.
and
Yeah.
then how do you make does it well obviously but I'm still going to ask, are there, stages where you feel like this is not going to be the painting you want it to be? Do you change a lot of things during the
Yeah,
process?
I don't change that much. I don't deviate too much, especially with the tree stuff, because I feel like I finally have kind of a approach there. I have a set, it's kind of like the tree of rules that if this happens,
Okay.
and so I feel like I have a pretty good response system for,
Mm-hmm.
how things go with the paintings. It still happens sometimes, but I'm pretty meticulous and, plan these things out pretty well to where there aren't too many surprises. It
Mm.
still happens though sometimes.
Okay.
I would say probably every fifth painting is, that happens where I'm like, oh shit, this isn't going how I want it to. And,
Yeah.
you start editing and moving things around. And it's usually in the beginning. I feel
Okay.
like typically my starts I have a hard time with. I hate starting things.
Mm.
They're always ugly. There's always this like, I take it back. Actually, the very beginning is usually pretty strong. And then there's like 20 minutes in or a half hour in, and you're like, oh God, what have I done? And that's the part that I hate.
Yes.
But, I feel like usually the second half of a painting is it's pretty standard. I just phone it in.
Mm. It's like
Well, I don't
meditation
phone
then.
it in, but yeah, but
Yeah.
it's a lot more expected, right? Like there's less surprises.
Yes.
I kind of know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
and there's comfort in that. There's a lot of comfort in
Mm.
the
Yeah.
predictable. You
Yes.
know what I mean?
Yeah. And do you shut everything down like Facebook and telephone and family and stuff, or do you just
No, I'm
work in the
actually the
living
worst.
room? Or?
So for years I worked in the living room, and that was my thing. In the house, I worked in the living room. Had an easel off on the side and kind of just dealt with whatever happened. When we had our second son, Milton, he started really liking to paint on things, and so I would be working on a painting, and then I would get up and I would walk away, and I would come back. I'd be like, I don't remember doing that, and
Oh
so.
man.
And so I was like, "Shit, man, we gotta figure something out." So when we moved out here, there was an old barn on our property that I took about a year, but we renovated it, and I built it into like a shop. So I have a standalone shop now that's
Wow.
separate from the house, about 100 feet away, and
Wow,
that's
that's so
great
cool.
because
Yeah.
it keeps the kids at bay at least a little bit,
Yes.
Uh, but I mean, in terms of distractions, man, my yeah, it's loud in here. I've become my grandpa. I keep the news on all day. I keep the news on all fucking day. I just listen to the news, and
Okay.
it's repetitive and boring and depressing and
It's like a
sensational.
contrast to
And
the
just
peaceful paintings that you do.
it's funny. It's weird, but I love it. I love it. I just thrive on the chaos of the news. Yeah,
Wow,
and I think
that's
maybe just living
fascinating.
out here in the forest where it's so quiet and there's like nothing happening. I think it's like my one little line in on
Mm.
the madness. That's my screen of humanity to keep me connected. I guess I don't
Yeah.
know,
Well,
but yeah, I try to keep distractions pretty frequent in here. I mean, I got the dogs in here all the time. I we usually have the two mastiffs out here with me. We have a basset hound and a Weimaraner as well, and they come out sometimes, but they're mostly the girls stay in the house usually. They're
was
more.
it was it you who posted a while ago that you broke your finger walking the dog?
Oh yeah. So you know what happened was in the springtime we have all these rabbits out here, and I mean tons of rabbits, tons and tons. Every few years the rabbit population explodes out here, and you walk outside and it's just like, oh, the grass is moving. There's like 5 or 6 rabbits running, and these guys are usually pretty good about it. Uh, Last spring it was getting really rabbity, and it got to a point where I was getting tired of having to chase the dogs around, because they would go out and just chase rabbits all the time. So I would keep them on leashes, walking them back and forth between my shop, and they're strong. I mean, these guys are,
Mm.
I can't, when they pull, you let go, but or else you're gonna get,
Yeah.
you're gonna get yanked. So usually I'm pretty on it, but I was walking outside. I had my daughter in my arm, right? She's 2, so I'm holding a 2-year-old. I have both of the dogs. I have Bob, in one hand. I had Kevin in the other one. and I put the shitty leash on Kevin. It was this leash that had a big knot tied in the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I even thought about it when I did it. And I was like, it's okay. We're just walking out to the barn. It's not like we're going for a walk, right? So we're walking out. Kevin sees a rabbit, takes off. And stupidly, I usually, it happens a million times. I always let go. But I had my daughter, and I was just like, kind of like, oh. And I tensed up.
Oh, man.
And I tensed up, and I held the leash. And the leash went between my fingers, and that knot just went pop, and busted my knuckle, like where I was like, oh, man. No. And, it's like swollen out sideways. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure I broke it. I mean, it's not the same anymore. Like, it doesn't go straight, and I can't make a fist the same, like with the same tightness, but it's back now. I mean, I have functionality, and I rock climb. I can climb with it again.
Okay.
So it can hold weight.
Yes.
But it took a while. It took about I was actually telling my wife the other day, I was like, man, it's finally at a point where I can use it again.
Wow.
A year later. It's been about a year.
Do you paint with your left hand?
No, thankfully.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. And, it's fucked up too, because like this has happened to me a few times where I've hurt my left hand, and like my immediate thought is like, oh, thank God it's my left hand. You know what I mean? At least it's the left, because that one doesn't matter. That's the throwaway hand. That's the one you fall on.
Yeah. Wow. You were talking a little bit before we started that I have a dog now too. He's 1 year old, and it's also a big dog. So I can totally relate to that. And luckily it hasn't happened to me yet. But I can still hold him, but he threw my wife off a couple of times. So it's really you can learn them a lot of things, but sometimes there's a bird or a rabbit or something.
Squirrel.
Yeah, exactly.
Just go.
Nothing you can do.
No. Still a dog. It's still a dog. It could be the best dog ever. It's still a dog.
But I love
these guys are crazy.
I love how they force you to get into the habit of going out every once in a while. It's really a good break, from work.
It's the best. I mean, that's why I love them, man, because they force you to pay attention to them. They force you to take breaks and pace yourself. They force you to take time out,
Absolutely.
They kind of demand it from you, but that's great. I try to spend at least a half hour a day at some point laying on the dog bed with my dogs, in a big pile.
Yeah.
I just love them, man. I mean, they're great dogs. I mean, they really are. They're good, but yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, dogs this size, it's because I grew up with dogs. I always had dogs, but I never had anything this big. And it's certainly a different beast, because you can't stop them. You know what I mean? I've literally been in the situation where, I've been in a situation where I'm walking them, and then something happens, and in order to stop them, the only thing I can do is fall on the ground and sit on my ass, plant my feet, and lean back like this, and they will still pull me as fast as you would run. I mean, you're just dragging across the ground. They've pulled me down the road on my feet like I'm water skiing before.
Whoa!
Where I'm like holding and just because you can't stop them. I mean, you can't. It's when all three of them, well, four of them now, it's. What, 2, 4, 6, or 500 pounds? 500 pounds pulling, and I don't stand a chance. I'm like 160 pounds, man.
Wow. Yeah.
But it's great. I mean, I'll always have dogs. I'll always be a dog guy. I'll always have dogs out the shop. I mean, the hair sucks, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Well, cool. Let's see if we have any questions.
Yes.
Let's see.
God. Get this big long string of Marco expletives on my phone. Fuck you, Marco.
I have someone who sent me a message. He asks, could you explain your decision-making process? How do you group high and low key areas?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like I try to. I'm pretty methodical about it. It's pretty simple. I try to keep things in 3 values to start with. I do a shadow, a middle tone, and a highlight. And I'm I'm very strict with that when I start laying in a painting. I won't deviate because the tendency is always to like just go in and start rendering and pull some
Yes.
form and get something working. I resist that very hard, and I try very very hard to make sure that my value pattern is established from the beginning with three values.
Hmm.
From there, then I can go in and start refining and playing with things.
And
But
then,
it's
and
that
for
three
example,
value.
if you have the sky going from really dark to bright, for example, how do you deal with a transition like that in that early stage?
I am. It depends. It totally depends. I am very much a look put. I mix the paint. I will hold the paint up to whatever I'm looking at, and I will mix it until it is the exact same value of what I'm doing. And with skies in particular, I feel like sky transitions. That's something that I am extremely accurate with that stuff. I will sit there, and if it takes me an hour of mixing paint to get my high value and my low value right, I will do that to make sure that the value. And it's less about color, right? Like color
Hmm.
is kind of trivial.
Yes.
Color is where you can fuck with it, but the value is paramount, and
Yes.
you have to make sure that when you hold that brush up or that palette knife in the paint in front of your reference, that it disappears. It should just completely disappear when you squint. You can't see it anymore. And so I'm very very adamant about that. Like it's
Okay.
it's
But
it's funny because it's
what
the
I meant
easiest thing in
was
the
really
world.
in that early stage where you say I'm only sticking to three values. When you have such a soft transition, how do you
Oh,
divide it?
it will literally be one value. I will keep
Okay.
it one value. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, totally, totally. Because like stuff like that's where like the devil's in the details. You know
Yes,
what I mean? You'll start
absolutely.
doing that, and all of a sudden, oh, you've thrown the key off on something else. And
Exactly.
so I find that keeping it simple in the beginning is always the easiest way. And again, it's always I'm such a believer in like holding that paint up and making sure that the values are right.
Yes.
It seems like the dumbest thing, but it's like this idiot proof way of painting that like, oh, it's the right color, and now I can't screw it up,
Yeah.
because
It's
otherwise I'll screw it up.
I feel the same way because it helps you to at a very early stage judge your painting almost like it's a low res version of the painting you are
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
going
yeah,
to make. So
100%.
you can judge it because you will stick to those values and you will have variation but all within those value ranges so the whole concept of what the painting is going to be is already there. And so
Right.
I was for me that really works and also I need to be able to judge my painting along the way
Yes.
and so I'm not painting just one area and leave the rest on for the
You
last
gotta
part of
you gotta be able to see how everything plays with one another, right? Like
exactly
like key works as a whole. Like everything has to fit together, or else
exactly but
it's like,
I
oh,
was
that one hill sticks out and it looks weird,
yeah, yeah, and then
Yeah.
you have to repaint stuff that you could have done right from the beginning. But I was really
Hmm.
surprised when I saw a live demonstration of Jeremy Lipking who
Hmm.
started with a tiny brush and he started painting the eye and the pupil and the highlight on the eye and the eyelashes and he just worked his way around you know and it was a great
Wow.
painting but I have no idea
Yeah.
how he manages all those values working that way
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
No, that would
also
be
the
kind of
placement of
difficult.
things because if you have all the details in there but then I would have the problem oh the eye should be a little lower or and then I would have to repaint so
I feel like because I know that like that approach, right? And like I can do that sort of, but I feel like my work always comes out kind of like, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it's like
yes
jerky or something. Like it doesn't
yes
fit together as well as it could,
yeah
and
I
that's
I, I I would apply that approach more when I would want that like if I want a Lucian Freud kind of feel to a
right.
portrait then that's an approach but he does realistic portraits and they're
Totally, totally.
amazing but for
Yeah,
me
that's
it's like
crazy.
wow how does he do
Yeah, I
that.
have no idea, man. I have no idea. That's wild. That is wild. But yeah, there are like what's his name, Morgan Weisling. He's another one
Hmm.
that does that similar
Yeah,
kind of like.
yeah,
How do you do that?
yeah.
I can kind of do that, but I feel like I always lose the drawing. I feel like
Yeah,
I always lose the fucking drawing. I can't make everything fit together. Mm,
yeah,
it's beyond my comprehension.
yeah. And I often work pretty small. I think it's I I wonder how you deal with that because the painting behind you is pretty large, and then
Yeah,
very
yeah.
especially at the beginning when you have these big areas to block in. Do you just because that takes a lot of time, and do you just do that exactly that way you explained, where you just fill in all the values, those three values basically, and then
So for something like this, what I'll do is I'll do a value, like I'll do a monochrome first. And once I get that monochrome study in, it's like, that's like most of the work, honestly.
mm,
Uh, with something like this, like I'll do the monotone, I'll let that dry, and then I'll come in and I'll start glazing, and I'll glaze color into it, like local color. Once I get that to a point where, I'm feeling it and I'm feeling okay with it, that's when I'll start coming in with opaques, right?
okay,
And from there, it's like I kind of work the whole thing. I work all over the place. I definitely don't pick a spot and branch out.
okay,
I'm working all over, and just trying to dial in areas,
mm,
as I go. And I find that like, especially for stuff like this, it kind of helps me keep everything together,
yeah,
working that way for sure.
oh cool. And I noticed that in a lot of paintings you have these highly saturated dots of color in dull areas. Is that something that you do intuitively, or is it something that you push from the reference that you have?
It's a little of both. I feel like what I'll try to do, it's definitely like an intuitive thing, but I try to interpret the reference. I'll look at things and be like, what color would go there? What color could go there? What transition could that be? Or, it's definitely kind of I wouldn't say it's a random decision because it's certainly informed by the picture.
Hmm.
It's intentional, but yeah, I feel like I'm almost just trying to look for what I can squeeze it, like what I can get away with.
Mm.
Is
Yeah,
how I
I
would
can
describe
imagine.
it. You
Yeah,
know what I
because
mean?
sometimes they're really, colors in from another color scheme almost. They're really
Yeah.
brightly saturated purple or pink or.
Oh, and that's like, dude, honestly, that is like my greatest victory when I could get away with something like that. You know what I mean? When it's like, oh man, that color so should
Yeah,
not be there. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
that's
But
cool.
it
Yeah,
works. You're
yeah.
like, yes.
Is that something that you do at the very last stage, or does it happen throughout the
It's
process?
typically toward the end. Yeah,
Mm,
it's typically toward the end.
mm,
Yeah, when I'm just kind of dialing things in. There's a phase. I feel like the last like 20% of the painting, is that kind of refining where
mm.
I'm doing a lot more dry brush,
Yeah,
breaking up edges. It's boop, one thing here, boop, one
yeah,
thing there, and
yeah,
less of
yeah,
this. And it's actually kind of my favorite part, honestly, because it's where you can like really make it pretty, and like
yeah,
make
yeah,
it
yeah,
pop and find all those fun little edges and
yeah.
flourishes. And you know, I'm obsessed with like abstraction in painting. I love making something look real through abstract
Oh
means.
yeah,
That is like my pure obsession with painting is that, and how far you can push that. How
oh
crazy
cool.
you can get something and not render it, but still make it look rendered.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And that last 20% of the painting is where all that stuff happens. I feel like,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
and you really get to, you know, direct the eye to parts you want people to look at
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
So
Yeah.
is that dry paint? Is that paint on top of paint that is already dry?
Usually yes, yes and no. There are stages to it. I like working on top of tacky paint to get certain effects. There's just certain things you can do with it that you can't otherwise. But then working dry, I'll let it sit out and dry out to where it's almost like a oil pastel or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's kind of semi solid, and that can produce a whole. It's a cumulative thing, right? Like I don't. There's no way I could get that in one setting.
Mm,
It literally has to
yeah,
take like a month of drying and setting up and just kind of employing that full range of effects, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
different paint viscosities and all that stuff to try to get as much variation as you can.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember really early on when I was in art school, I remember talking to someone, and like people say things that you just never forget, and you're like, like little criticisms that you're like, I will
Oh,
never
yeah,
forget
yeah,
those.
yeah, 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 yeah.
I remember someone told me once that I used the same brush stroke too much, and that there was a lot of sameness in my work,
Mm.
and that lit that fire under my
Oh,
ass, and I was
okay.
just like, all right, I realize that this is something that this is a weakness that I need to address, and it's just something that I have to pay attention to.
Oh, wow.
And so that's, I am always constantly trying to keep my brushwork non-repetitive and lively.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's brushwork is like your language, right? Like those are the words you use in a painting,
Yeah.
right? Like painting is like writing. Your brushstrokes are kind of the words you use. It's the words you choose to describe, and I try to be very careful with that stuff.
Yeah.
I try to pick them very intentionally, and I try to find strokes that will describe what I'm trying to say, the same way a writer would try to find the right words to describe
Yes.
what they're trying to
Yeah.
say. You know what I mean? Because there's so
Exactly.
many
Yeah.
different ways you could say something,
Yeah.
but it's finding that right way that feels right to you.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. And I'm curious, the canvas you work on, is it linen, or is it a smooth canvas, or?
See, you know what I've been working on like the past few years? I go to Home Depot and I just buy plywood. So it's just like
Okay.
it's just birch plywood.
Okay.
There's there's a little yellow flower.
Yes, that's the one.
But yeah, so like almost everything is on plywood. This big one back here is on like a birch panel, like a cradled birch panel that I had someone make for me. But yeah, I like painting on panel. I'm a big panel guy.
Yeah.
It sucks to store because they're big and heavy, and
Yes.
you can't roll them up. But the effect, the stuff you can get on it, I like not fighting a surface.
Yeah. Yeah.
That too. I am like super anal about my surface.
Yeah, me
Like
too.
I do. Yeah. Oh, dude. Yeah. I have to have like the perfect eggshell, like gesso.
Yes.
Perfect. Like it's 7 layers. I progressively sand from like a 100 grit to like a 150 to a 220.
Wow, yeah.
Usually I end at like a 320 to a 600 grit, to where it's almost like
Wow.
a tabletop or something. But you still get those like little micro scratches that'll hold the paint, And yeah, I'm like really big on surface.
Wow.
And there's also there's like I feel like there's a psychological element to it too. Like preparing
Oh,
a
yeah.
surface, like you want to put like passion into it, and you want to build it in a way that it's precious to you, and it's something
Yes.
that like you're gonna treat it that way, and you're gonna value it, and you're gonna
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. It's this weird mental thing with me, but like I feel like it helps me maintain that level of interest and concern for it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I
Yeah. It makes
I don't know.
perfect sense.
It's weird. It sounds kind of dumb, but like saying it, but
No,
yeah,
it makes perfect
it
sense.
is.
Yeah, absolutely. And because to me it feels like you do your paintings really for yourself. Is
Kind of do.
something that you also also do exhibitions, and do you sell your paintings, or is it because I could
Sometimes. Yeah, I do sometimes. Yeah, earlier on in my career, I was doing a lot more of that. Before we started Massive Black, and that part of my life kind of got sucked into something else. But the past few years I've been trying to exhibit a little bit more. I've been doing group shows and stuff like that. I had a group show coming up in this June with my friends Carl Dobsky and Sean Barber, who are like my two best painting buddies. And it sucks because I don't know what's going to happen now. I mean,
No.
because this
Yeah.
quarantine thing. The show, I think they were talking about mid-June, so
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's going to happen, which kind of sucks. I mean, I had a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff. I mean, this big one was for that, and I had a couple other ones that, I was kind of planning on for that, but who knows now? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, the selling the paintings thing has been weird, man. I mean, like I would love to be able to sell these things, and I would love to be able to have a collector base and all that stuff. It's weird. I don't know. I don't feel like I feel like artists like these paintings a lot more than collectors do. That seems to be my problem. Is illustrators and fine artists seem to like them pretty well, but
Absolutely.
I put them in
Yeah.
shows, and and
Okay.
nobody gives a shit about it. It's not a
Okay.
pretty girl on a couch, so
Yeah, well, for me, also the fact that you do them from this inner motivation, that's I'm a strong believer in that, and that you're not catering to a market. That could also,
But at the same time,
if you
but at the same time, it's like I also feel like that is kind of hindering. It's hindered me in a way with this stuff,
okay.
because it is. I feel like they're almost so personal that people can't relate to them. A lot of times, I think with fine art, if you're to look at like fine artists who are, very successful, they work within genres
Yeah.
typically. They typically have kind of a thing that they do, and it's usually there's a broad appeal to it. I don't know if I'm doing that with these, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong, really. I don't
Uh,
know, but it's
well, I could imagine that the portraits of your wife or your dogs maybe too personal, but
yeah, those certainly
I
aren't going
can't
to.
see how these paintings would not be in high
It's
demand.
weird, man.
Yeah.
It's really weird. I don't know what to say. So if you want to buy a painting, then no, just kidding. But yeah, I mean, it's weird. I feel like it's one of those things that I didn't start doing these to sell them.
Yeah,
I
that's
haven't.
what really I think is very strong about it, because that's why they are feeling so honest to me. You
Well,
know?
well, thank you. That means a lot to me, man, to hear you say that. And I mean, I feel like if nothing else, I mean, I feel like I should just keep doing them because I like doing them and they matter to me. And there's this voice in the back of my head that's like, maybe at some point, people appreciate them or something, or it'll just be my kid's problem. Here's a fucking workshop full of paintings that you got to deal with. Sort that one out.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I feel like, I mean, I'll be honest. I haven't put myself out there a lot. I have not aggressively marketed myself the way I probably could.
Mm.
You know, and that's a byproduct of a lot of things. Family life. My own weird shyness and apprehensions with things like that. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I thought when I started doing these, I was like, oh wow, this is probably like a fairly universally accepted genre of painting that people would probably like. And yeah, 5, 6 years into it, it's like painters seem to like it, but I put them
Okay.
in shows and they
Wow.
never sell.
That's I don't know why.
Yeah, it's weird.
I think they're amazing.
I feel like I've sold more paintings to artists
Mm.
than I have to
Okay.
collectors of
Okay.
these,
Yeah.
specifically like
Okay.
trades and,
Yeah.
and sales. Yeah,
Well,
which is weird.
well, I also think it's a compliment.
Well, yeah, because they know they
Yeah,
know what they're
exactly.
looking at, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I could take solace in that.
Yeah.
That's my consolation.
Yeah. Well, we've been speaking for a little longer than an hour now, so I think it would be a good time to
Cool, cool,
end
cool.
this. Thank you so much for being a guest on the live stream. I want to ask you if there's anything you want to promote or let people know. Go ahead.
Oh gosh, I don't even know, man. I mean, we had that show coming up in June at the Maxwell Alexander Gallery in LA, but I don't know if that's happening now.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, we've been working on some forums, some art forum things lately, but that's still in beta testing, so I don't know if that's really ready for me to plug.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know. Coronavirus. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess not really much I want to say
Okay.
except thank you for reaching out, and it's been great talking to you. It gets lonely out here in the barn, so it's always nice to see a friendly face and talk to somebody, talk to a fellow creative artist guy. And I love your work.
Well, thank you.
It's,
Thank you.
yeah,
It's really been a pleasure. And thanks everyone for checking in and asking questions. And
yeah. Thanks.
I'll be doing this again soon. My next guest will be Francis Vallejo. So I think
Nice. He's
that'll
a
be fun.
sweetheart. He's such a sweet kid. I love that guy.
Yes,
He's really, really
and
good dude.
insanely
Yeah.
talented too. So I'm looking
So
forward to
talented.
that.
Too talented. Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah.
know.
He's
Okay.
amazing. That'll be a good one. That'll be a good
Yes.
one.
Okay. Well,
Awesome.
goodbye everyone, and I'll see you soon.
Bye, everybody. Take care.